Hello guys, welcome back to another Big Al Devlin video, and this video is actually a sort of sideline video really. It's not a story or from the Nordic belief system at all that I'm going to be sharing with you today, but more of a discussion of how modern religion views the world, or practitioners of modern religion view the world, and how more ancient humans who believed in ancient religions like Odinism, Nordic paganism, how they would have seen the world, because there is a big difference, okay? Simply because if you go and watch my Cosmos creation video, you'll understand that the way that the ancient people believe the world is created and the way that they believe time progresses and stuff is completely different to more modern beliefs, and that has its impacts, and I'm going to further discuss those impacts in this video, and discuss the consequences of that and how that would change your viewpoint. Hope you enjoying the videos as well, guys. So if you do, give us a thumbs up, and feel free to put anything in the comment section that you might want covering, or anything you might want an expansion on. I'm going to try and keep this video fairly short, but I tend to fail at that and tend to end up on the 40-minute mark regardless of how much I try. Okay, so first of all, what is amongst the most major religions of current day is the belief that there is a supreme being ruling essentially over all of us, or you pray to a supreme being. The religion is dedicated to a supreme being that you are part of. Okay, now a supreme being is a being or creature, whatever word you want to give it, that has ultimate power over itself and over everything around it, has ultimate knowledge and ultimate experience, and has most likely created everything that is in existence, and could out of whim probably destroy everything that is in existence, just by wanting it. Okay, that is in very brief what a supreme being is. In a bit more depth, a supreme being typically is represented more often than not as a transcendent god, a god that exists outside of our own timeline. And even the modern Christian God, even though he came down and became almost immanent in the form of Jesus Christ, other than that very short period of history, he has always been a transcendent God from that point onwards, and from that point before that as well. He's always been a transcendent God, and what that means, as I say, is he exists outside of our timeline. He exists both in the past, the future, and the present, all at the same time. And it becomes at this point where your God becomes very hard to relate to, because one, they're so immensely powerful, it's mind-blowing. It's just like, wow. But the power we can perhaps understand, but the sheer immensity of the being makes it almost, in my opinion, almost alien to us. And I don't mean that as a conspiracy theory that gods, the ancient gods are aliens or anything like that. I just mean literally the word alien it's an alien concept. It's not totally relatable. Okay, that's what I mean by it. And so when you pray or try to interact with a transcendent God or supreme being, ultimately it's very hard to picture what that God would look like in your mind. Realistically picture what that God would look like in your mind. It's really very difficult to understand the personality of that God, because its personality is so large you couldn't describe it. And so as a result, under modern religion, God has become very impossible to reach in many respects, apart from maybe the very few who who, you know, are religious figures who may be able to converse with God. But even they, you know, you never hear very often that the Pope has said, oh, God has spoken to me and he has said this. It's very much a one-way conversation. However, in ancient religion, it was very different to that. The gods themselves, including those that were part of ancient Nordic paganism, their pantheon of gods, and the godlike creatures also that existed that weren't prayed to but were still gods in many in all respects, were not supreme beings. They were just very powerful beings, but they could, in essence, and they would, as it was determined by fate, die. You know, they had a beginning point and they had an end point, whereas a supreme being has kind of always been there. And not on top of that, the ancient gods themselves had limitations to their powers. They were not capable of doing everything and anything, and in fact, mass majority of the time, the powers that they did possess, or the knowledge that they did have, or the wisdom that they had, was learnt, or a price was paid for them to have it. Look at Odin, for example. Odin is the king of the gods, and arguably one of the most powerful gods to exist within the Viking pantheon. Yes, Thor was stronger, but Odin had a cunning behind himself that made him very powerful, and it's why he was chosen to be the king and ruler of the gods of Asgard. Now, even though he was the god of wisdom, it never describes in the Viking text him being born with that wisdom. Wisdom typically comes from life experiences. That's why typically the older you are, the wiser you become, because you've lived it, you've seen it, you've got the t-shirt, and so on and so forth. Basically, you know that if you know you're like, for example, I'm 30, so I'm still quite young. But when I look at teenagers and I see them doing certain things, I think, oh, they're making a mistake there, because I know exactly what's going to happen, because I did it myself when I was younger, and I know exactly the consequences of what they're doing. And the same happened with my father when he looked upon me as a teenager, and his father when he looked upon me. You know, age brings about with it some degree of wisdom, as long as you're willing to open your eyes and perceive the consequences of your mistakes and also your successes, because of course wisdom isn't just predicting, you know, like Captain Hindsight, so to speak, trying to predict the bad stuff that's going to happen. It's also how to predict to bring about good things. For example, wisdom could be knowing that if you study hard, you're going to get the best grades you possibly can at school. That is a form of wisdom which not a lot of kids listen to, for example. But the true wisdom is knowing that if you're going to study hard, you're going to get better grades at school, which then at turn could then give you better job opportunities, possibly better wealth, more likelihood of getting married and having children when you're older. You know, it's like playing chess. Wisdom, the wiser you are, the further you can see ahead, the more moves, so to speak, you can see ahead. And so it's one of those things that only develops over time with life experience, because you need to have experienced it to some degree yourself, or you need to at least discuss the topic with your elders. You can learn wisdom by just talking to someone who's older to you and listening to them. Now, what they tell you might be wrong, but in that form, even when people tell you something that's wrong, as long as you analyze it and look at it and think, no, they're wrong, that in it again is in itself a form of wisdom. And so, you know, Odin, as I say, even though he was the god of wisdom, had to go out there and learn his wisdom, just like we, as ourselves, as human beings, as we go through time, have to learn our wisdom. And so that is what I like so much about the ancient Nordic belief, system, and that the gods within the pantheon that they believed in, is their gods are very human in many respects. Yes, they are superhuman, if you wish. They are far more powerful than us, and their limits of potential are far beyond ourselves. But regardless of that, they still have to put in the effort that we have to put into also to be able to achieve whatever they're after. They're trying to achieve much grander things than us, and so they might actually feel overwhelmed at times with what they're trying to achieve, and they might fail at what they're trying to achieve. And there are certain stories which show you God's failing at trying to do stuff. And the ancient religions, all the ancient religions, aren't afraid to show God's failing or struggling at the very least to achieve whatever it is that they're after, whatever they are pursuing. And that for me makes, as I say, along with the fact that none of them are all powerful, all knowing, all loving, none of them are supreme beings in any form whatsoever, makes them highly relatable. It makes them far more human than any supreme being could ever be. Even one that, has apparently visited Earth in an imminent form. It's still an all-powerful supreme being, in many respects. Okay, and I just feel that I didn't really point that out enough in the last video where I did sort of brush over it about supreme beings and non-supreme beings, about the pantheon of Viking gods, is the impact that has on the way that you see the world. Vikings and the ancient Nordic people and current practitioners of Nordic paganism and Odinism and that won't really be afraid to fail. Why fear failure? If you're trying to do something that's really hard and you fail, well, that is not only human, but it's also godlike in its own respect. The gods themselves would try sometimes to do something that was very hard to achieve, and they would fail, but they would learn from it and possibly go back at later when they're better prepared, and would then achieve whatever they were trying to go after at a later date. And that's exactly what human beings do. If we fail at something, we, as long as it doesn't kill us, or maim us or whatever, like the consequences are that severe, which is very rare, we are capable of taking a step back and learning from it. We can learn from it, and we can go, okay, well, this is what I did wrong. This is what I need to put right. And actually, you know what? I need to bring this along as well. Maybe some support. Maybe if I get someone to come with me, then I can achieve whatever I'm trying to do. And or maybe I just need to spend longer at it. Another year of whatever it is. And so it doesn't feel like you're trying to prove yourself, so to speak, within ancient religions, to a kind of almost like father-like figure that can never be pleased. The gods of old are just like us. They're very human-like in nature, and so, as I say, the way that it can change your perspective is that if you're a practitioner of this belief set, or you're looking back at in a historical perspective at the practitioners, the ancient practitioners of this belief set, you can see why they were so driven and so determined, and why the Vikings in many ways conquered large amounts of territory and were willing to go into seas that and oceans and stuff that they had no idea potentially where they were leading. They could have been going to their deaths for all they know, but they did it because they knew They had to try. It was as simple as that. They had to try, and if they failed, well, even gods sometimes fail. There's no fear of failure, and that's the biggest impact that having a more immanent godlike system has on its followers, is it makes you less afraid of failure, for starters. Now please put in the comment section, guys, what else you think having, you know, non-supreme beings, immanent gods that live and visit the worlds that men are found on. Please feel free to put in the comment section how you feel that changes your perspective of life, and how it might make things different for you in comparison to someone, for example, who is a Christian or a Jew or Muslim. And if you're a modern practitioner of religion, one of those that I've just mentioned, then please feel free to put a counter argument in. This is all about debate. There's you know, we're all here to learn off one another in many respects, but I really do believe in my heart of hearts that having gods that, you know, are human, more human than the current god that is typically worshipped, that makes the religion as a whole, one, easier to comprehend and understand, but it also answers certain questions, such as why is there evil in the world? Well, it's quite easy to obviously answer, because, well, some gods aren't nice and let things happen, and the good gods, well, sometimes they're just unaware that the evil's there, and they can't, or they don't have the ability to handle it, or the desire to handle it. They've got their own agendas, they've got their own things that they want to do. They haven't made this world perfect, because they themselves are not perfect, not capable of creating perfection. How can the imperfect create perfection? It's simple. We don't live in a perfect world, because our world was created from the corpse of, you know, an imperfect being by imperfect beings who killed him, you know, and that is why potentially there is cruelty in the world, and, you know, even in nature itself. Anyway, guys, just a few thoughts I'd like to share with you. I'm going to do a second video now on Odin. I've been trying to film it for a while now. It's been hard though, because some of it relates to this kind of thing, but it's why Odin is my patron god, and why I feel he is a very real god, if you know what I mean. He's very, very easy to feel almost like a relationship with, but I'll get into that at a later date. Nice one, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and feel free to comment, even if good or bad critique, whatever, please put it in. See you soon.